that comes out every year. A really, really interesting, it doesn't move that much over the years, but it's a really interesting kind of look at, so who does the average punter really trust? And if you look at the top, we've got paramedics and firefighters, people who have a sort of altruistic kind of sense of altruism about what they do. They do stuff not just for themselves, but for the benefit and the greater good of society. Yeah. And there's kind of an interesting lesson in that, And the more self-serving you get, like call center operators, you're just there to harass you and spoil your dinner, and door-to-door salespeople, and lo and behold, company CEOs as well, then the less we trust them. And I think the whole trust thing at the moment, it plays out through different ways. I mean, I think trust in big business just after the GFC plummeted. And in fact, I know that the Edelman do a trust index barometer around the world, and currently the least trusted source of advice about a company is the CEO. Okay, fact. And it's sitting at about 34%, and it's gone down by 14 percentage points in the last 12 months. It's the single biggest decline in trust in the history of the Edelman Trust Index, So it's kind of like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And if you look at the list here, we've got journalists, and we've got priests sitting at number 26. But I think priests are going to go through a bit of a hard time. And we do have a royal commission that's going to be going on for 3 years. If you think about the role of religion and priests, for example, in our community, in our lives, I think really, just being objective about it, I think the whole trust that we would have had in that institution, if you like, is going to be severely undermined. And that's what's kind of going on in our world a lot. The finance is the least trusted industry, by the way. Just I know some people from finance in here, and it's not because they, necessarily behave in any different ways, but they are almost a sort of manifestation, some symbolism of, what big business is all about. It's the banks, yeah, and of course post GFC, there's this sort of noise that's going on, and you've probably seen some of this. In fact, right now down here in Martin Place, there's about 3 people occupying Sydney at the moment, okay? So this little protest is out there, but we don't see people on the streets in Sydney going, we are the 99%, but we certainly see people in Sydney having this conversation, and people in Australia, this conversation, I work 60 hours a week. The head of my company makes my entire yearly salary every 2 weeks. I'm the 99%. And that comes out a lot in the media. I mean, every time there's a story around the kind of monies that's being paid to people, and it comes up a lot. Should the government intervene and control this? And was the average punter sitting here going, you know what, it's all a big con, and I'm not feeling very special, I'm not really feeling part of this whole deal. Okay, so that's the whole trust thing, yeah? So the average punter out there, we're talking about customer experience. Let me go back to Peter Drucker. So Peter Drucker, all kind of, let's go back to the principles of what it's about. And he said famously, the purpose of business is to create and keep a customer. And that's like, wow, okay, that's pretty good, So we kind of create them and then we keep them, yeah? And forever. And that's kind of how you grow your business. And the transaction you have with the customer is not the end of the relationship, it's the beginning of a relationship, and a mutually rewarding thing that's going to go on for time. So the question therefore is, okay, now we're getting into consumers are people. The question is, what do people want? Okay, it's a very fundamental marketing question. So, they don't trust big business, we want to give them a great experience, we want to keep them and keep their loyalty. So what do people want? Now, you'll notice that I'm using the people word here. I'm not saying what do consumers want, okay? So I like to make a distinction here, because if you're a marketer or a large company, you're thinking about your customers as consumers, it's not a very flattering kind of, like, am I a consumer? I just consume your shit, Or am I a person? And, on the left here, we've got this sort of, barcode, institutionalized way of understanding our customers and consumers, which is typically the approach we use. And, there's a lot of segmentation that comes into this, putting people into groups and clusters. It could be as broad as I'm Gen X and you Gen Y. But, the truth is I'm a bit of Gen X and Gen Y, and I'm a young baby boomer, all in the same minute. Don't just put me in one of those boxes. Ready, okay? Now I can do a study, a segmentation study of everybody in this room based on where you live, what car you drive, and it might have some interesting applications for a Bohemian Media online strategy, okay? And that's great. But if I'm building a brand, okay, and I want to create a meaningful connection, a lasting connection, an impression with you, the questions I want to ask when I say what do people want is, I don't really care what car you drive. The interesting question and the important question is, what drives you? Not where do you live, but what do you live for? So this is what I mean by what do people want. It's a brand way of thinking about your customers as real people. But we don't do that. And we don't go to dinner parties and go, so, what do you live for? You know, people think you're weird. Don't, you know. We go to dinner parties and go, so where do you live? Well, I live in Manly. Oh, so do I. You must be friends. It sort of works like that, yeah? Let's put ourselves in the shoes to understand, you know, what do people want? You know, what do people live for? Let's put ourselves in the shoes, and we're talking about customer experience, you know, let's walk in their shoes. You know, it's a great exercise, walk in their shoes, you know. In other words, you know, as well as being business people and marketers, whatever you are, you're also customers and ordinary people like everybody else. So let's not make this distinction between the consumer and the customer is out there, because we are all that here inside this room. So Hugh Mackay did a study, and it's not quoted a whole lot, but I quoted quite a lot, in 2004. What do customers really want? And he spent 3 months doing this big study, and this was his headline summary, yeah, of what customers want. The fundamental customer need is to be esteemed, is to be taken seriously and treated like a person of worth and not a walking bag of money. In the end, people only want one thing, an experience that makes them feel better about themselves. When that happens, they'll feel better about you too. That's the rub. That's just a beautiful thought. You know, if that's the thing that's driving your whole customer experience strategy, do people feel better about themselves after dealing with us? In the same way that you walk into a coffee shop and the person who's serving you your coffee can give you a great experience or a shit one. Yeah? They can be grumpy, not connected to you, and almost quite rude, and you go, well, yeah, great, thanks for the coffee, mate. Or they can be friendly, pleasant, smile. Maybe even use your name. Oh my God, they really love me, you know? This is the sort of stuff that really switches people on. And so we come to Dale Carnegie, yes? 6 ways to make people like you. Yeah? Has this changed since 1934? I ask you. Number 1, become genuinely interested in other people. Number 2, smile. Wow, isn't that, you know, smile. Remember, number 3, that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Number 4, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Number 5, talk in terms of the other person's interests. And number 6, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. We're going all the way back, yeah? If you had these as the sort of fundamental principles, this is what people want, yeah? This is what you want, it's what I want, it's what everybody wants. This is not rocket science, guys, and yet, when we put on our marketing business hat and our segmentation studies, we get caught up in all that shit. We forget the humanistic stuff, the stuff that really makes people want to do business with you and want to become a customer. In other words, there's a concept going on here which is high tech and high touch. And I think this is a very important distinction to understand, that a lot of technology will drive the kind of experience you're giving your customers. And that's fantastic. But I would say the more high tech the world becomes, the more high touch it needs to be. So you really want to get the balance right between your technology that's driving a certain system, but being high touch at the same time. John Naisbitt wrote this book, High Tech, High Touch. There's now a whole genre of new high-tech, high-touch customer service books. It's a no-brainer, it makes sense. It's a really good principle to keep in mind. Here's an example of it. I love this little story. There's a physician, a Wall Street physician, who has 48 patients that come and visit him. Okay? Outcome's the same for all 48, except half of them he sends a letter saying, thanks for the visit, you know, hope you're feeling great. Yeah? And the letter he sent, by the way, was a handwritten envelope with a real stamp on it. Not a frank letter. You know those franking things? It's so impersonal. It's come from some bloody company who put something from me. The moment there's a stamp on it, it's like, oh, this is personal. I'm feeling the love here. He then surveys these people, these customers, and asks them how his service was. Of the 24 that got a letter, 20 rated his service as completely satisfied, the highest possible rating. Of the ones who didn't get a letter, 5 out of 24 scored him as completely satisfied. He got a 4-fold increase in complete satisfaction because he sent them a bloody letter. Now go figure, yeah? Like what the heck? You see, the outcome's the same, but the process and the way he dealt with half of them, just simply by sending a letter, made that sort of a difference. I think there's a good lesson in that. There's a real fundamental lesson in that, which comes back to the principles of the corner storekeeper. Do you remember the corner storekeeper? Some of you don't. You think it's the guy in Moringa Mall, and it's not. That is not the corner storekeeper. The corner storekeeper was on the corner of your street, where you lived as a family, and he knew you, and he knew your sister, and your mom, and your dad. He knew your name, he knew what you liked, and he kept shit under the counter for you, and he'd give you freebies. And he was your mate. And when you were 15 and you weren't supposed to be smoking, he gave you smokes. Yeah, and he was your mate because he understood. Yeah? So, yes, sonny, have a cigarette. The corner storekeeper might behave in this way, and we go back to the Hugh Mackay study. So this is Hugh Mackay's holy grail of great customer service and what people want to feel a valued customer. They listen to me. Very similar to Dale Carnegie. They have good product knowledge, present and friendly. Do more than the minimum, make an effort, volunteer information. They seem pleased to spend time with me. Don't hassle me, value real people over computers. They accommodate mothers with children. They recognize me and they use my name. Okay? That's the second point. Consumers are people. When you think about them that way, you get back to the humanity of it, and actually this is what people, they want smiles, and they want high touches and high fives, and they want an experience that makes them feel good about themselves. Third thing, people trust businesses who give a shit. Now, this is where branding comes into it, okay? So branding is a history. Doesn't look Katrina. You know, the old, I'm going to brand the cow. And a lot of companies, if you try and brand your customers in this way, this is a bit of a hostile experience. You will be our customer and we're going to brand you. And we're going to hit you with millions of emails. And we're going to send heaps of shit your way so you can become a loyal customer of us. And it's like, no, that is not what we mean by branding. That is not cool. That's not the way to go. Branding starts with this way. Branding starts with why. In other words, if you're going to get out there and have a customer experience, and it's going to be all around, let's say, giving people an experience makes them feel better about themselves. If you're just doing that because, oh, we're just ticking the boxes, you know, and actually we don't give a shit about it, so we're just going through the motions, you've got a problem, yeah? What you want to do is, the spirit in which you serve your customers and work with them comes out of who you are. It starts with why. Why? Why do we exist? What's our purpose? You know, what are we here to do? What sort of an experience, what do we believe about our customers? You know, or are we just here for shareholders? This is kind of a really interesting thing. A lot of companies talk the language of customers and yes, the customer comes first and all that. It's like, yeah, bullshit, mate. Your shareholders always come first, you know? Not that shareholders are important, but you know, what comes first? If the customer comes first, isn't the shareholder ultimately better off if the role of business is to make and keep customers?